All right, strap in, everyone. Today we're diving deep, really deep, into the world of William Shockley,
Shockley.
a name that screams Transistor and Silicon Valley, but also kind of wrapped up in, well, some pretty hefty controversy.
Oh, yeah.
We're talking a journey from physics genius to, well, a figure whose views on race and intelligence later on, they cast a shadow over his whole legacy. Big claims, big impact.
And we're sticking to the facts, just the bio you gave me, aiming for that, balanced view.
What gets me about Shockley is this brilliance and flaws kind of woven together, To get how we even got to those views later, we got to start back at the very beginning.
Okay, rewind time. London, 1910, that's where it all starts. But then his childhood, of all places, Palo Alto, California. It's like almost a sign, isn't it?
Right. Destiny calling for the future father of Silicon Valley. But get this. Early life wasn't your typical storybook upbringing. Homeschooled till 8 years old.
Really? I'm schooling back then, in the early 1900s. That's got to be unusual. Was this family, already science-obsessed or something? Oh, absolutely. Dad was a mining engineer, global guy, spoke 8 languages fluently. And Mom, Stanford grad, one of the first female U.S. deputy mining surveyors. Can you imagine the dinner conversations at that house?
Lively debates. Ideas just flying across the table.
Yeah.
I bet. Do you think maybe that environment, all that emphasis on, talking things out, solving problems, did it shape how he led teams later at Bell Labs?
Possibly. He definitely wasn't shy about sharing his opinions, that's for sure. Maybe it instilled that intellectual confidence, or even a little bit of my way or the highway thinking. Who knows?
Interesting. So from all that brain power at home, he goes to Caltech, gets his Bachelor of Science, then MIT for his PhD.
PhD thesis, electronic bands and sodium chloride.
Hardcore, right? Serious scientist from the get-go. And that solid foundation, it leads him to Bell Labs, 1936, the place that's about to be the epicenter of tech revolution.
Bell Labs. Transistor Magic Central. But going in was the goal, invent the transistor as we know it now? Not exactly. Mervyn Kelly, he was research director, had this vision, right? Replace those clunky vacuum tubes with something solid state. Telecommunications revolution, that was the dream. Shockley, along with Walter Brattain, focused on semiconductors. Copper oxide semiconductors, to be precise.
Okay, so experimenting with stuff that conducts electricity, but not as well as a regular conductor. Was it smooth sailing, or did they hit, major roadblocks early on?
Oh, far from smooth. Late 1930s, those initial attempts, based on Shockley's ideas about using an external electrical field, F50, didn't work out. Then boom, World War II. Changes everything.
So science brain gets recruited for the war effort.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He ends up leading anti-submarine warfare research, optimizing depth charge patterns, figuring out how to protect ships from those German U-boats, and even went to the Pentagon, met with top brass. Pressure much.
Right. Science minds often get called up during crises. Think it affected his later work.
Possibly, yeah. Leading a team, analyzing all that complex data, making huge decisions under pressure, probably shaped his leadership, for good or bad,
And then there's that chilling casualty report, 1945, potential Japanese invasion.
His analysis, it predicted massive casualties, really heavy stuff, influenced the decision to drop the atomic bombs. It shows you the power and the heavy consequences of scientific analysis. Sobering, really.
Absolutely. But after the war, focus shifts back to solid-state electronics, back to Bell Labs and the quest for, well, maybe not the transistor itself, but its precursor.
Right. Bell Labs forms the special solid-state physics group. Shockley's at the helm. It was a team packed with brilliance, let me tell you. John Bardeen, Walter Brattain, Gerald Pearson, Robert Gibney, Hilbert Moore, and some seriously skilled technicians.
Like a pressure cooker of brilliance. Was it truly collaborative, or did those big personalities clash?
From what I read, it was camaraderie, strong, at least at first. They'd meet almost every day, tossing around ideas, brainstorming. But hey, ambitious projects, challenges are a given, right?
And in those early days, what were some of the biggest, hurdles?
First attempts. Still clinging to those external electrical field ideas, they just flopped. Failure after failure. Frustration mounting.
Stuck, needing a new approach. Where'd the breakthrough come from?
John Bardeen, one of the physicists, he proposes this new theory about surface states. They were blocking the electrical field from getting into the semiconductor.
So deeper understanding of the materials themselves was needed. Did this theory set them on the right path?
It did. Focus shifts to figuring out these surface states. Walter Brattain, he starts playing with light, shining it on the semiconductor, seeing how it affects those states. They started publishing, getting closer to understanding what was really going on.
Okay, glimmer of hope appearing. What next?
Things get really interesting. They start experimenting with point contacts surrounded by electrolytes.
Okay, for our listeners who didn't ace chemistry, break that down. What are those and why so important?
Picture a tiny metal wire touching the semiconductor, that's your point contact, electrolytes, liquid that conducts electricity. They were using them to make a specific kind of electrical connection with the semiconductor.
Playing with different ways to get that electricity flowing through.
You got it. Then, Hilbert Moore, their electronics wizard, builds this circuit that lets them change the frequency of the signal coming in. More control over their experiments. That's when things got really exciting.
Sounds like we're on the verge of transistor birth here.
Almost. Gerald Pearson, on Shockley's suggestion, applies voltage to a drop of glycol borate, like sugary syrup, across this thing called a PN junction.
PN junction. That's not just two materials stuck together, right?
You're right. It's where two semiconductors with totally different electrical personalities collide. This clash, it's key to making the transistor magic happen. Pearson applies the voltage, and guess what?
Amplification.
Bingo! Power amplification. Tiny but significant step towards the transistor. But of course, there's a twist.
Oh no, what now? Don't leave us hanging.
Just when they think they've got it, Bell Labs lawyers find a snag. 1930 patent, guy named Julius Lilienfeld, describes something way too similar to what they're working on.
Someone beat him to it. All that work for nothing.
Not quite. Lilienfeld had the idea, but his design, it wasn't actually functional. The tech just wasn't there to make it real.
Like a blueprint for something impossible to build back then. Smart lawyers, those Bell Labs folks. So how'd they get around it?
They played it safe, focused their patent applications on the specific design Bardeen and Brattain came up with, the point contact transistor.
But where's Shockley in all this? Not on the patent.
And that's where it gets messy. Shockley was furious. He felt his earlier ideas, even though they flopped then, were the basis for the breakthrough, and his name should be on those patents.
Snubbed. Even betrayed by his own team. How'd he take it?
Well, fueled by frustration and that ambition, he starts his own secret research, determined to make a different, better, more commercially viable transistor. Didn't think the point contact one was the be-all, end-all.
Wanted to prove himself. Maybe even outshine them.
Seems likely, yeah. Thought the point contact transistor was too fragile, hard to manufacture. He was already thinking mass production, getting it out into the world.
A visionary in a way. Looking past the lab towards how it could be used.
Absolutely. But that drive, it also led to tension on the team, and that sets the stage for the next part of his story.
We're back. Last we left off, William Shockley's feeling a little, well, sidelined at Bell Labs, secretly working on his own transistor. Ambition, ego, definitely in the mix there.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And it's that drive, maybe some resentment mixed in, that pushes him to his next move. Not just a different transistor, but a better one. Proving his genius, right?
So what's different about his approach? What's he going for that Bardeen and Brattain, hadn't cracked yet?
Shockley wasn't sold on the point contact transistor, thought it was too fragile for mass production, too finicky. But more than that, he was wrestling with the theory, especially how these things called minority carriers worked.
Minority carriers sounds complicated. Break it down for us non-PhD folks.
Okay, imagine the semiconductor's a huge mine. Electrons are like the common ore everywhere. But deep inside, there's these rare gems. Those are your minority carriers. Less of them, but they're the key to a powerful current flow.
So control the gems, you control the electricity in a stronger way.
Exactly. Shockley's convinced those minority carriers they hold the secret to a tougher, more reliable transistor. He's picturing minority carrier injection, where you put in a few of these special carriers and it triggers a way bigger flow of current.
Challenging the norm, huh?
Yeah.
Pushing the boundaries of what was known.
Risky.
Big time. And while he's working on this, something happens that totally re-energizes his research. John Shive, another guy on the team, builds this transistor, bronze contacts on either side of a thin slice of germanium. Simple experiment, huge impact.
I'm intrigued. What'd they find? Spill it.
It proved that these holes, think of them as the missing electron acting like a positive charge, could move through the whole germanium slice, not just along the surface.
Like they found hidden tunnels in the mine, letting the gems travel freely. Perfect analogy. And for Shockley, that was it, the spark. Shive's experiment backed up his hunch about minority carriers, led him to imagine a totally different type of transistor, the one that'd become his masterpiece. the junction transistor.
Now, I gotta ask, is this where the transistor sandwich comes in?
Ding, ding, ding. Picture it, layers, right? Different semiconductor materials stacked like a sandwich. And those boundaries between the layers, the junctions, that's where the magic happens.
This sandwich structure, it let them control those minority carriers better, those gems.
Exactly. Way more reliable, powerful amplification compared to the point contact one. Robust, efficient, and super important, easier to manufacture.
Sounds like a winning formula. Did he rush to announce it?
Nah, he's thorough, remember. Wants everything perfect. So he refines the design, and in 1950 publishes this massive 558-page book, Electrons and Holes in Semiconductors, like the ultimate textbook for anyone wanting to understand this revolutionary tech.
Dense stuff. How was it received?
Became the book for scientists and engineers worldwide. Shockley was laying the foundation for a whole industry. But he wasn't one to shy away from the spotlight, you know?
So, when did he finally reveal this junction transistor to the world?
Picked a fitting date, July 4th, 1951, an American invention announced on Independence Day.
Quite the statement. Did it live up to the hype?
Oh, absolutely. It was immediately recognized as a superior design. The junction transistor, with its robustness and reliability, quickly overshadowed the point contact transistor, became the foundation of the electronics revolution we're still living in today.
So Shockley's contribution, undeniable. But we know it didn't come without a cost, especially with his colleagues.
Right. Bell Labs tried to present them as a united front, but Shockley, maybe still stung by those earlier patents, didn't downplay his own role, created friction, especially with Bardeen.
So the team that revolutionized electronics, it started to break apart.
It did. Bardeen leaves Bell Labs in 1951, moves on to superconductivity research. He actually wins another Nobel Prize for that later on.
2 Nobel Prizes. Wow. What about Brattain?
He distanced himself from Shockley, too, wouldn't work with him anymore, got assigned to a different research group. So that collaborative spirit at Bell Labs, gone, partly because of Shockley's personality, his desire for recognition.
Seems like success, especially with a big personality, can breed tension. What did Shockley do next? Stay at Bell Labs.
Nope. 1953, wanting to be closer to his mom, she was getting older, and maybe that entrepreneurial spirit kicking in again, he leaves Bell Labs, heads west.
Silicon Valley time.
You got it. 1956, he starts Shockley Semiconductor Laboratory, Mountain View, California. Big fish in a small pond, ready to build his empire.
So this is the spark that ignites Silicon Valley.
In a lot of ways, yeah. Shockley attracted brilliant minds, had a real talent for spotting talent, built a team of some of the brightest young engineers and scientists, but there was a problem.
We talked earlier about Shockley being, well, not the best leader. Is this where those flaws start showing?
You got it. Shockley, the lab genius, he turned out to be, well, kind of a nightmare boss. Autocratic, demanding, and get this, super suspicious of his employees.
Not exactly building a happy workplace. What did he do?
Micromanaging, second-guessing decisions, and, this is wild, he even used lie detector tests on his staff.
Lie detector tests. Seriously, that's next-level paranoia.
Toxic environment. And in 1957, just a year after the company started, 8 of his top researchers, they'd had enough. They became known as the Traitorous 8.
Mass exodus. Something was seriously wrong. What did those 8 do next?
They left Shockley Semiconductor, got help from a wealthy investor, and started a new company, Fairchild Semiconductor.
Fairchild Semiconductor. Legendary. It's like poetic justice, almost.
Right. Shockley's inability to trust his team, to empower them, well, it led to the creation of a company that would become a giant, pioneering integrated circuits, fueling the explosion of Silicon Valley. Unintended consequences, for sure.
Amazing how someone so brilliant could be so self-destructive. What happened to Shockley Semiconductor after they left?
It never really recovered, floundered, got sold off eventually. Shockley's empire dream, it crumbled, mostly because of his own failings as a leader.
A lesson for any leader, no matter how smart they are. What did Shockley do after this?
He stuck around the area. 1963, he joined Stanford, professor of engineering and applied science. Seemed like things were calming down for him, but, not quite.
This is where his controversial views on race and intelligence come in.
It is. This marks a shift for him, away from transistors and into, well, a much darker area.
And we're back, diving deeper into the life of William Shockley. From scientific heights to leadership, well, crashes. It's been quite the ride. And now, the final chapter, where Shockley's brilliance takes a backseat to some Some really troubling views.
It's a tough part of his story, but we gotta look at it. Transistors revolutionized tech, but his later focus on race and intelligence, it casts a long shadow.
Hard to reconcile those two sides, you know. Genius scientists, yet promoting such controversial ideas. How's that even possible?
It reminds us, brilliance doesn't mean someone's immune to prejudice or just plain flawed thinking. Shockley's a cautionary tale, maybe. Unchecked ego, even with groundbreaking achievements, humility matters.
Okay, so this final chapter. What was it about race and intelligence that got Shockley so fixated?
In his later years, he gets obsessed with this idea that intelligence is mostly genetic, and some racial groups, especially black people, are inherently less intelligent. He even argued this supposed inferiority, it caused social and economic disparities. Just wow.
Incredibly harmful, offensive claims. Was there any science behind it?
None whatsoever. He had no background in genetics, but he presented his opinions as scientific fact, even though the scientific community rejected them completely. Zero evidence to support his claims about racial differences in intelligence. The concept of race itself, it's largely a social construct, not biological.
So pseudoscience, using bad data, biased interpretations to back up existing prejudice.
Sadly, yeah. And his statements about race and intelligence, they caused a lot of pain, controversy. Many of his colleagues cut ties. He became an outcast in the scientific community.
A sad downfall for someone who'd been a pioneer. Did he ever, realize the harm his words were causing?
Doesn't seem like it. He remained convinced of his theories, right till the end, even with all the criticism and rejection, stubbornly sticking to his views, even when evidence said otherwise. Speaks to that unyielding personality we saw before.
Intelligence, success, they don't guarantee wisdom or empathy, do they? Before we get to the end, I'm curious about his personal life. What was that side of him like?
Sure. Shockley was married twice. First time was to Jean Bailey. He was just 23. They had 3 kids, 2 sons, and a daughter.
Did the kids follow him into science?
Complicated relationship with his children, actually. One son did get a PhD from Stanford, and his daughter graduated from Radcliffe. But Shockley, he believed they were intellectually inferior to him and his first wife.
Ouch. Harsh. Sounds like his focus on genetics, intelligence, it even messed with his own family.
It did. And that first marriage, it ended in divorce in 1953. Later, he married Emily Lanning, a psychiatric nurse, in 1955. Emily actually agreed with some of his controversial ideas, which probably made him even more isolated from people who disagreed.
Besides his family troubles, any hobbies, interests that gave him some peace?
He did, actually. Loved rock climbing, spent a lot of time scaling the Shawangunk in the Hudson River Valley. There's even a tough climbing route named after him, Shockley Ceiling.
A sense of adventure, even with all the controversy.
Yeah. He also loved giving lectures, even dabbled in magic. Story goes, he surprised an audience at the American Physical Society by making a bouquet of roses appear at the end of his speech.
Huh, that's a surprise. Hard to picture the guy who, advocated those views, also enjoying magic tricks and showmanship. And then there's that story about the sperm bank, right?
Oh, yeah, that's a weird one. Shockley donated sperm to the repository for germinal choice. It was nicknamed the Nobel Prize sperm bank.
The goal was to, collect sperm from geniuses, Nobel Prize winners, and, create super smart babies. Sounds like sci-fi.
It does. Shows you how much he believed in the power of genetics. Ironic thing is, his views on race and intelligence, they actually hurt the sperm bank, made it harder to get other Nobel winners to join.
His own beliefs undermining a project that, fit his ideas so well. Strange.
It is, and his later years, they were pretty lonely, estranged from a lot of his friends and family.
Accomplished, but alone. Holding on to beliefs that pushed everyone away. Sad ending to a life that started with so much promise.
It is. William Shockley died of prostate cancer in 1989, age 79. He was estranged from most of his loved ones. His children even found out about his death from a newspaper obituary.
Heartbreaking. So how do we make sense of these two sides of William Shockley? Genius scientist, helped create the electronics age, but also promoted those harmful views on race and intelligence.
Tough question. No easy answers. We can't erase what he did for science and technology, but we can't ignore the damage from his flawed beliefs either. It's a reminder, genius doesn't equal being a good person. And even the smartest people can hold prejudice and flawed thinking.
We need to be critical thinkers. Question everyone's opinions, even people we think are brilliant or successful. What's the biggest takeaway from Shockley's life, his legacy?
For me, it's understanding that scientific progress, it doesn't happen in isolation. It's shaped by society, culture, and also by the beliefs and biases of the people involved. We gotta be aware of those influences and challenge assumptions, even our own.
Well said. Progress needs more than just smarts. It needs empathy, humility, willingness to listen and learn from others, even when they disagree with us.
Exactly. Shockley's story shows us that knowledge, progress, they have to go hand in hand with ethics and social justice.
Thanks for taking us on this deep dive. Highs and lows, brilliance and flaws, it's been quite a journey.
It has. Hopefully for our listeners, it's sparked some thinking about this life, a life that asks some important questions about science, society, and how we use knowledge wisely and ethically.
And to everyone listening, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into William Shockley. His story's over, but the conversations it starts, they're just beginning.